when we write a research paper and send it away to get peer reviewed, we will be criticized by reviewers. Basically, reviewers will always have some recommendation for improvement. I have never seen a letter from a reviewer that says, everything is perfect, publish it right away, exactly as it is. They'll feel like they're not doing their job unless they point out at least one or two errors. So it's not reasonable to expect to get your paper accepted with no criticism at all. The good news is that reviewer comments are useful in improving the quality of your paper. One study done by Ernst showed that reviewers' comments were deemed valuable, or authors thought they were valuable, in 76% of manuscripts that were accepted. But even in manuscripts that were rejected, most authors believed that the reviewer comments were helpful. What does that mean? It means even when you're rejected, those rejecting reviewer comments can improve the quality of your manuscript for another journal when you resubmit to another journal. So hang on to those comments and see if you can reuse some of the most obvious advice that the reviewers give you before you resubmit to another journal. Now, authors use comments in revision. Another study showed that, this is of rejected manuscripts, 82% of the authors used at least one change. And in this study, very interestingly, most of the papers were published that were rejected. Most of the papers were published within 2 years, and most of them were published in lower impact journals. However, some of the rejected papers were published in higher impact journals. Now, one reason for that could be that the rejecting reviewer advice was very helpful and actually improved the quality of that paper. So value those rejecting comments. Your paper could actually improve after rejection if you use some of those reviewer comments. And there's no reason you have to go lower in impact factor. If you think your paper is much better, you could submit higher and you might actually publish in a higher impact factor journal. Now, when you are invited to revise based on reviewer comments, the journal editor will give you a time limit. I've seen 2 weeks for very minor revisions, up until 3-4 months for what the editor might assume to be a very heavy revision. Generally, the shorter time the editor gives you to revise, the more minor the editor feels your revisions should be. Now, in my class, I tell students to go the extra mile for the reviewer comments. I tell them, think of this as your last chance to publish, and remember that when you're invited to revise, your chances of publication are about 50-50. So it's not a guarantee that you're going to publish just because you're invited to revise. Many papers are rejected by reviewers because they're unsatisfied with the amount of work that you've done, or perhaps you're not willing to do all of the work that the reviewers have asked. My advice: do as much as you possibly can, and if you can't do what the editor or reviewers ask, explain in a lot of detail, using evidence, not emotion, why your way is still a good way in your paper. And I'll discuss that in an upcoming video. Now, when you reply to the reviewer, use evidence, not emotion. Don't get angry. I know you may feel angry because you feel that the reviewer is attacking your baby, attacking your paper, and you want to protect your baby, defend it, but don't respond angrily. Take every comment seriously. First, say thank you to the reviewer, and then tell him, convince him you are doing everything possible to make him happy and to make that paper comply with his requirements. And if you cannot do everything he asks, you should explain why it is beyond the scope of the study. Sometimes reviewers will ask us to do a crazy amount of things that we never intended to do, maybe solve problems that we never intended to solve. And sometimes we have to explain to our reviewer in our comments how that's another paper, not this paper, and this paper the scope was here, and another paper the scope may be somewhere else. we have to do this politely and nicely in our comments to him. And sometimes we also have to tell him about the word count limit that the journal editor has given us, that we just don't have a whole book to answer all of this, but here's what we can do. Again, we'll do this very politely, and I'll show you examples of how we can politely respond in these situations in my upcoming videos. Don't attack reviewers. Never say, my idea is good and yours is not. I'm right, you're wrong. This is always going to be a problem because the reviewer will respond and he'll say, no, you're wrong, I'm right, I'm the reviewer, I win. He's right. When we fight reviewers, reviewers always win. So don't fight reviewers. Try very hard to have a polite, diplomatic conversation in your letters with reviewers. Be as nice as you possibly can. Now, when you're responding to reviewers, differentiate in your letter between their original comments, probably in one font, and your response in another font. Reviewers can't remember what they wrote to you. It was a long time ago. So when you differentiate between their comments and your comments, now he can remember, that's right, that's what I asked him to do, and then I can see directly his response. One other thing that I like to do is when I respond or reply to the journal, I ask students to send along a copy of their paper with the track changes, the Microsoft Word track changes function on, showing what has been cut out and what has been put in. And then it's very easy for the editor and the reviewers to check and see the new part that we put into the document without scrolling through the whole paper and trying to match up the page number or the line number. They're able to identify very quickly the new part and then check that part to see if we've done what they asked us to do. For more information about how Taiwanese scholars can publish in international journals, visit my blog, editing.tw/blog. I have articles and videos about how Taiwanese scholars can publish more effectively in international journals. I also have editing and translation service for Taiwanese scholars who are preparing manuscripts to publish. And you can visit our site, editing.tw, to find out more about that. Thank you for joining us.